Hello guys, it's Palace13 here. This is my new video with Exsanguinate Ascendant. It is a guide I am developing from 3.20 Sanctum League, I believe. I have this guide on the official forums, and now I've decided to make it into a video. We'll start with the showcase with tier 16 map, kind of a rippy one at that. I will showcase what the build is capable of first, and then we will move over to PoE when I can explain why the build works the way it does. So I'm doing right now maps with Syrian Exarch, some legions, some breaches, essentially whatever works for a good clearing build. You can see I probably have the wrong... yeah, had the wrong filter. You can probably see that Exsanguinate works fine when clearing, and that's because you can chain.
Can I not have but a moment's respite?
I see we have a legion here, so that would be a good opportunity to see how well the build is clearing. A bit of Harbinger action, so we can see the survivability. As you can see, it's not the fastest, but the quality of life in terms of being able to chain those Exsanguinate tendrils makes it for a really good mapper, especially for this cost. Clear. Now let's kill the boss.
Freeze!
Okay. This is how the build behaves in the mapping scenario. And it is designed to mostly map. I will showcase a bossing encounter in which we swap Exsanguinate to Reap, and I don't believe I have any invitations for some pinnacle bosses. Yeah, so we will showcase it on maybe Black Star. Increased life damage, sure. This is how it looks like in terms of bossing.
The challenge begins. Your champion will fall. Simulacrum. Solar Storm. Deep space. Starflare. Astral Avalanche. How
Until the
unexpected.
others arrive to challenge me for this realm.
Yeah, this is how it looks like. So now that you guys see how the build works, how it performs, let's go about the basics. So, the build is an Exsanguinate / Reap Ascendant. We use Exsanguinate for mapping and leveling, for that matter, and Reap, Vol Reap essentially, for bossing. Both skills are physical spells. Both have a hit portion, which does physical damage, and a damage over time portion, which does physical damage over time. The damage over time portion is what we care about mostly. So the build scales this damage over time. As you can see, both Exsanguinate and Reap have a base duration of 1 second. This is the duration of the dot dealing damage to the enemy. And both cost life. They don't have mana because they have an intrinsic life cost. This poses some implications for our build. Mainly, we have to have enough life regeneration so that we can cast Reap or Exsanguinate freely. We also want a lot of skill effect duration so that the debuff on the enemy that deals damage is long enough so we don't have to cast all the time. We can extend this duration, as you can see. My Exsanguinate has a base duration of 1 second. Right now the duration is 2.1 seconds. This comes from the passive tree. We get exceptional performance and the duration mastery. We can also get some skill duration from Unnatural Instinct. The details of the passive tree we'll discuss in a second when I go to PoE. As for the game, I wanted to also cover what skills do we use. Of course we have Exsanguinate or Reap in terms of our damage potential. We use a lot of auras. This build has so many auras that work that it is really hard to fit all of them. Pride scales physical damage, Malevolence scales damage over time and skill effect duration. Grace is a defensive aura that grants evasion. I state that in the guide that you can use either Determination or Grace. Depends on your preferences. I prefer Grace, but it's up to you. War Banner is excellent in terms of how much damage does it give you, and it only has 10% mana reservation. Petrified Blood is essential so we can survive while reserving mana and life. As you can see, we reserve like 40 something% of our life, and we reserve Vitality and Herald Purity on our life with Arrogant support. This lets us use Pain Attunement. This grants 30% more spell damage when on low life. And this actually scales our damage because both Exsanguinate and Reap have a line that says modifiers to spell damage apply to this skill's damage over time effect, which means we can use spell damage on our gear to scale our damage. We can use Righteous Fire, which grants more spell damage. We can use Pain Attunement that grants more spell damage. All of these scale our damage. This is similar to how cold dot spells work, and it is different from how Ignite and Poison works. These don't scale with attack or spell damage, but the spells like Exsanguinate or Reap, these do scale with spell damage. So now that we have a basics, let's switch to PoE. And here I have, dare I say, quite detailed guide, where you can see all of the skills that we use while leveling, a bit of gear, league start scenario, day 3 gear, the gear which you want to use at the end game. The same applies to trees. And now that we can have this, we can explain how this works. I have a detailed leveling guide in notes, which explains when to take with gem, how to link that, so you can just follow this and you should be fine. Some info on the weapons that should be used while leveling. You know, the usual stuff. The build is an Ascendant because of a few reasons. Mainly, the reason is that there is not a lot of Ascendancies that work in terms of damage for us, because this is a physical damage over time that is not a bleed. So the Gladiator makes no sense. You can go with some defensive Ascendancy like Champion or Juggernaut. You can also go with Poison. Some people are using Exsanguinate with Pathfinder, so that you can abuse the physical spell to deal poison. Poison has been nerfed. I believe it should still be fine, just not as strong. I still believe it could be stronger than this build. Anyway, this is the physical damage over time build, so there isn't any like obvious Ascendancy choice. So the Ascendant provides a few major points why she is good. Mainly, we can access a lot of tree points from her. We can split our tree to different regions. You can see with my PoE for like final tree level 97 that we go both in the Ranger Shadow region. We can grab some spell suppression, evasion masteries, charisma wheel, Revenge of the Hundred for the HP, inveterate, more spell suppression. We can go between Witch and Shadow to grab Pain Attunement. We can also go to the Duelist region to grab Prismatic Skin, Brink of Death, Champion of the Cause, Bannerman, and all of the live stuff. And this is the main strength of the Ascendant. She has more access to like 3 regions. She gets more access to jewel sockets because of that, because we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 jewel sockets that are 1 point investment. And because there is no like clear better Ascendancy, we can go with some various choices here. This guide chooses Hierophant, which grants you Arcane Surge. Arcane Surge normally grants cast speed and mana regeneration rate. I believe this was changed in 3.20 or 3.21. The change to Arcane Surge, because before it granted more spell damage globally, now it grants cast speed. The Hierophant makes it so your Arcane Surge grants more spell damage to you. So this is our damage upgrade. There is a small amount of defenses coming from 8% of damage taken from Mana Before Life, but this mini skill, we don't care about that. The other half of Ascendancy that we take is Gladiator. Gladiator, very straightforward, he grants 20% more physical damage over time, which is a notable change from how the Gladiator Ascendancy works. He has bleeding damage mostly, and the Ascendant part of Gladiator does physical damage over time. This scales our spells, and it also grants 10% chance to block attack damage. Some defenses, always fine. To be honest, the Gladiator and Hierophant choice are just my picks. There are many similarly good options in Ascendant. You can go with Champion to have aura effect, always nice. Taunt on hit and increase damage taken by enemies when they are taunted. It goes almost head to head with Gladiator or Hierophant in terms of damage, just because of these two things. You can go with Slayer, so you can have Overleech and Culling Strike, but this is a bit redundant because of our gear choices, more on that later. You can go with Trickster and get 2% more damage for each different type of mastery allocated. We allocate, I believe, 8 or 7 types of mastery, so this is also decent damage. The previous version of the guide used Raider for spell damage, movement, speed generation, frenzy charges, phasing, onslaught. The thing is, it was a bit too hard to sustain frenzy charges, so like, here we go. So my picks for now are Hierophant and Gladiator. Hierophant mostly because of getting Arcade Search also grants cast speed. More on that later. So, we have our leveling guide, where is it explained what weapons to choose, what gems to pick, and so on. You can also use trees when you can see what notables go for first. Some life, some damage, some regen. Life regeneration is very important in this build because your skills cost life, so you anyway want to have some regeneration, but now it is more necessary. You also want to go for the exceptional performance for duration, so that you can use your skills less often, or in terms of Exsanguinate you can stack more damage over time debuffs on enemy. And you can follow this through acts and through ascendancy points. Essentially the build uses Exsanguinate on maps, as you saw, and Rip on bosses. We reserve our auras, summon mana, summon life. We transition to low life and pain attunement after campaign. I figured through my playtesting that you don't really need that much damage while leveling. The Exsanguinate does enough damage by itself just from the spell scaling. So there's no really need to go pain attunement, and we can use that life just to survive. So the transition is only for campaign and maps. Like, we transition to low life at the end of the campaign. There is day 3 version, there is low life final version. Yeah, you can follow this and you should be fine. In terms of our skills, furthermore, we use a guard skill. You can use Steel Skin when you use Grace as a defensive aura. You can use Molten Shell if you use Determination as a defensive aura. Valorous Fire. We can't use Valorous Fire that often. It is mostly for the regular Righteous Fire, which grants more damage, to be honest, but it requires enough regeneration so that we can sustain it. As you saw from the gameplay, we could use regular Righteous Fire and sustain it just fine, but that requires enough both life regeneration and maximum fire resistance to maintain the Righteous Fire. We use Enduring Cry, which is like the panic button that you can press and regenerate some life quickly. That is your entire another life flask, basically. We use vulnerability as our curse. I believe that the best way to apply a curse is just by self-casting it or using Arcanist Brand. And here I use Arcanist Brand early, but in the later stages I transition to just self-casted, just because the build is really socket starved at the end. Mostly because of our auras. There's a lot of gems that are used to fit all of our auras. I use 2 movement skills, and I strongly advise you to do as well. Whirling Blades is excellent at moving you fast, as you can see in the game. We have Whirling Blades connected to faster attacks and life tap, which makes us move really fast without needing to go that much for movement speed.
Can I not have better moments respite?
You have also your blink skill to teleport when you need for some reason, like boss fights and you want to avoid some damage, or you want to move from one ledge to another, and you cannot do this with Whirling Blades. Therefore I advocate for using 2 movement skills. That's pretty much it from what I can see. You can invest later into Awakened Gems, so you can deal more damage because of that. Most of these are actually not that expensive. Mostly Awakened Brutality is no longer expensive. A lot of pure physical damage skills and builds have fallen out of meta as of recently, so Awakened Brutality is mostly cheap. Awakened Control Distraction was a bit more expensive. Awakened Chain is not necessary. You can use regular Chain. It is mostly a luxury update. Furthermore, I have regular Chain support in my gear right now. Also, the less damage with hits that Chain support grants doesn't affect our damage over time, so the downside is not that painful for us. In terms of our gear, we can now look into this. At League Start, I mean, you can expect much. I've inserted some +1 physical daggers as a League Start option. You can get +1 physical caster weapons as a vendor recipe when you vendor a caster weapon with gems that have in total 40% quality and have physical tags. So this is deterministic to get. And some craft to physical damage over time multiplier. Life and resist, some regen, the usual stuff. This is the League Start version. Nothing groundbreaking. Day 3, however, we get some really efficient gear. Mostly cold iron points. Everyone knows that these daggers are really great. +3 to level of all physical spell skills gems grants us about like 40% damage, I believe. You can duel with 2 of them. That is a good chunk of damage. To be honest, the cold iron points are really hard to replace. One thing is, these are daggers, so you can use Whirling Blades with them. And the other is, it's really hard to craft good enough dagger so that it is better than cold iron point. If I remember correctly, you need like +1 all, +1 physical, some dot multi, some spell damage to be better than cold iron point, especially because you can buy corrupted cold iron points with spell damage or damage over time. Historically, the spell damage ones were cheaper than damage over time because most of the poison builds cannot benefit from increased spell damage, so it was cheaper. and that is my choice. You can go with staves, so you can craft like +2 all +3 physical staff, but then you lose your whirling blades movement. I don't think this is worth it. You can use wands, but then you have higher intelligence requirement and you cannot use whirling blades again. So I advise to just stick with cold iron points, especially because they are much cheaper as of late, because seismic trap has been nerfed, because most of the physical spell poison builds have a choice between cold iron point and obliteration, and cold iron points were really cheap as of late. If I remember correctly, we can check this on PoE Ninja. Unique weapons. Cold iron point. Yeah, these were a few chaos right from the start, so this is a really solid option to start off. As an amulet we use the Eternal Struggle. This is a really good offensive amulet. You can get a 15% calling strike when the Searing Exarch is dominant, and you can get a solid damage thanks to that, because the dominant Searing Exarch mod of your choosing is physical damage over time multiplier. You can get I believe 16% physical damage over time multiplier or 25% while a unique enemy is in your presence. You get some attributes which can actually be helpful, because you may need some intelligence to equip cold iron points. So this is a really solid option. In terms of prices, some of these are like 10-15 chaos, some of these are 1 divine. There is a high variance in prices in Eternal Struggle, so just get what you can with these. In terms of rest of the gear, it is pretty self-explanatory. You want to have resistances, life, some of the defenses, armor evasion, these are important. You can get maximum resistances from Searing Exarch implicit on chest. You can get some aura effect from Eater of Worlds. You can get physical damage over time multiplier and physical leech from implicits on gloves. You can get some life regeneration, maximum fire resistance from implicits on boots. You know, your standard stuff. There's nothing extraordinary. When we go into the final gear, you can see that we use cold iron points with corruptions. These should be, of course, more expensive, but not as expensive. In the past few leagues, I bought these for like 1.5 divines, like week 1, I believe. So there's no like issue here. I still would be using Eternal Struggle. You can go better than Eternal Struggle. You could craft like +1 all, +1 physical damage over time multiplier amulet, and you could go further in terms of damage, but this is a really high investment in terms of amulet crafting, and this is really cheap option in comparison. Rest of the gear can be crafted to be a bit more than it was before. You can go with the enchantment on the helmet to grant +1 to maximum blood charges, so that your reap has 15% more damage. You can go with Righteous Fire, grants increased spell damage, enchantment for example. You can have some mana reservation efficiency on your aura as an enchantment. There's a lot of good stuff. You would also want some mana reservation efficiency on your helmet, so that you can, in the final version, reserve 3 50% auras and Petrified Blood and War Banner. This requires to get... this requires Champion of the Cause allocated, Charisma, Leadership, Anointed Sovereignty, and 17% mana reservation efficiency of skills. You can also use these 3 points with Dynamo and get Mana Mastery, so you can get 12% mana reservation efficiency of skills. These points are not as useless, because you get increased duration of guard skills, always something. But if you can like use this helmet instead. Most of the gear you will craft like this. You get a fractured base, for example. You can right here use the fractured regenerate life per second base. Use Essence of Loathing, which grants you mana reservation efficiency of skills, and use it until you get like tier 1 resistance or something like this. And then use Eldritch Currency to get some useful prefixes and craft a prefix at the end. Like here there is Armor Evasion and Evasion Life Hybrid, so that you can like fill all of the 6 affixes. This gear is really easy to craft. It requires some knowledge to do this, but these are really nice. In terms of implicits, you can go with Searing Exarch with cast speed. You can go with AoE, but it only helps with Reap. You can go with Vulnerability Curse effect. This is some damage here. And with Searing Exarch, and with Eater of Worlds, it's mostly mana reservation efficiency of skills. Maybe Arcane Surge effect, but I believe the mana reservation efficiency is too important. For the chest, anything that works defensively, life, armor, evasion, regen, resistances, spell suppression, whatever works. In terms of spell suppression, in the final version of the build, we get 18% from these points, from reflexes, 15% from evasion mastery, that's a 33 in total, and 39 from inveterate, so this is 72% spell suppression. To capture spell suppression, you need perfect 2 suffixes from your chest, gloves, boots. I reckon the easiest would be to get it on gloves, or maybe gloves and helmet, because you want to use Essence of Loathing on your helmet to get mana reservation efficiency, and chance to avoid elemental ailments on your boots. So this makes the craft quite expensive, unless you can buy spell suppression fractured items, which are always kind of expensive. Speaking of elemental ailment avoidance, we can go to 100% chance to avoid elemental ailments. We can get 50% chance to avoid from our boots, and then equip Ancestral Vision, which runs another 50%, provided that we have capped spell suppression, which we want to have anyway. These jewels can be quite expensive early. These are like 2 or 3 divines. They're really worth it. In terms of rings, life resistances, you can go with Essence of Delirium, I believe it was. It was the one that grants, yes, that grants damage over time multiplier. You can craft with these. In terms of your belt, almost always it will be Stygian Vice, because the Abyssal Socket is the best implicit. Life resistances, maybe some damage, the usual. In terms of jewels, you can use actually a lot of them, because we are Scion. We use 1 large cluster for physical damage, because it's the easiest damage we can get. These points are really efficient for what they give. The 3 best points are Master the Fundamentals, increase physical damage, all elemental resistances. We don't care for reduced elemental damage anyway. Battle Hardened gives us increased evasion rating in the armor and physical damage. Great. and Furious Assault, physical damage, attack, cast speed. This is a really premium node because we don't really have a way to get a lot of cast speed. This is like a one downside, because Exsanguinate and Re both have a really long cast time. They both have, I believe, 0.8 cast time at base. So they feel pretty clunky, pretty slow to cast, and the cast speed doesn't intrinsically increase our DPS because we want to like cast it once and your damage over time does damage for 2 seconds or something. So the cast speed is like your quality of life stat instead of your DPS and quality of life stat. So we don't have enough room to overinvest into cast speed, so every little bit is helpful. We use some of regular rare jewels. You want life, spell damage while dual wielding, spell damage, damage over time multiplier, physical damage over time multiplier, essentially anything that works. Nothing too crazy here. We can use Unnatural Instinct. I know it is expensive, it usually goes for like 6 divines early, but it provides a lot of value when inserted in specifically this socket. You get some of the cast speed and spell damage from here, you get some of the AoE from here, mostly helpful with 3, but that is something. You get skill effect duration from here, and you get some of the physical damage that these small nodes have, and life regen from here. It's really great. You can also use Watcher's Eye, and there are many great mods with it. You can have, like this one here, chance to evade attack hits while Grace, and physical damage while Pride. There is damage over time multiplier while affected by Malevolence. There are a lot of great defensive mods when you use Determination of Vitality. A lot of great mods. See for yourself. You can also use Impossible Escape Jewels. Let's insert one real quick, because there are a few that work really great for us. Mainly. This is not the one. This is the one. Mainly, as you can see, the Glancing Blows one is really great, because then we can get the whole Tireless wheel, and we don't have to path all the way to it. Avatar of Fire is really good because we can get a Hearty, which is excellent life regen node, and some of the damage from Vanquisher. Unwavering Stance is nice because we can get Prismatic Skin and Brink of Death, but we also want the Mastery, so I don't know if it is that worth it. You can also go with Imbalance Guard and get Prismatic Skin and Soul of Steel. There are some pretty good ones. I would... I don't know if this is necessary. As you can see, the current version of the tree just is fine without them, but maybe you can squeeze some points out. Maybe with this one with Unwavering Stance, there is something to be used here. That is, I believe, pretty much it with the build. There is leak start info here and leveling guide. All of this, what I said about the build, is also available at my guide at the forum. The link will be in the description, so you can see this by yourself. And I believe that will be it. Thanks for watching.
Can I not have but a moment's respite?
Let me know if you like this form of guide. This is the first time for me, so as you can hear, I stumble over my words and so on, especially because English is not my first language. But I still believe there was some knowledge to be gained from this. Anyway, I hope this guide will prove to be useful, and see you next time, guys. Bye.